is there anybody I can call for you?" The woman didn't answer right away. She was sitting on the curb outside Tidewater Hardware on Route 9, both hands wrapped around a paper cup of gas station coffee that had long gone cold. Her jacket was soaked through. Her truck, a 2007 Silverado with a cracked rear bumper and a Semper Fi sticker above the license plate, sat dead in the gravel lot behind her with the hood up and steam still rising off the engine block. Zora Callum, 28, looked up at the stranger who had asked. She said, "I've got it handled, thank you." She did not have it handled. Inside the shop, Nadia Fells, 19, was watching through the front window. She had been watching for 4 minutes. Her grandmother, Cleo, appeared in the doorway between the front counter and the back workroom, wiping her hands on a rag. "Child, stop staring and go ask if she needs help." Nadia went outside. That was a Thursday afternoon in Cordell, Louisiana. Population just under 4,000. One main road, 2 gas stations, a Family Dollar, and Fells Hardware, the oldest family-owned hardware and repair shop in Iberville Parish. The sign above the door was the original, painted by Nadia's grandfather, Vernon Fells, in 1988. The F in Fells had faded so badly that most people just called it L's Hardware now. Cleo said she would fix the sign when she got around to it. She had been saying that for 11 years. Nadia Fells had lived above that shop her entire life. Her parents had moved to Houston when she was 4. For work, her grandmother always said, and left it at that. Nadia didn't ask anymore. She had Cleo, she had the shop, she had the backroom workbench where she learned to strip a wire before she learned to read cursive. What she did not have was much time left. The letter from the Louisiana Community Technical College was in her room, tucked under her pillow the way other girls kept love notes. It was an acceptance to their 2-year electrical trades program, a scholarship partial, and a deadline. She had to confirm enrollment in 43 days or forfeit the spot. She needed $1,100 to cover what the scholarship didn't. She had $212. She was working the counter at the hardware store 6 days a week and picking up weekend shifts at a car wash in Plaquemine, and she was still not going to make it. Every morning she woke up and did the math. Every morning the math said the same thing. She never told Cleo. What was the point of worrying an old woman over numbers that didn't move? She went out into the rain and asked the woman on the curb if she needed help. Zora Callum looked up at her. She had close-cropped hair under a wet baseball cap. Dark eyes that were calm in the way that only comes from training, not from temperament. There was a scar on her left forearm, thin and pale, the kind made by something deliberate. She was not old and not young. She was the kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. "I blew a coolant line somewhere south of Morgan City," Zora said. "I've been nursing it up Route 9 for 30 miles. I need to be in Baton Rouge tonight or I miss something I can't miss." "But can't you miss?" Zora was quiet for a moment. She looked at the dead truck, then back at Nadia. "My son has a ceremony at Pennington Elementary at 6 o'clock. He's getting an award. It's the first time he's ever gotten one. He made me promise I'd be there." She said it without drama, just a fact. But the way she said it, the specific weight of it, landed somewhere in Nadia's chest. "How old is he?" 7. Nadia looked at the truck, then at the woman, then at the sky going the color of old pewter. "Pull it into the bay," she said. "Let me look at it. Now, hold on, before I go any further. This girl is 19 years old. She has 43 days until her shot at something real disappears for good. She has $200 to her name. She's got a grandmother with bad knees and a shop that loses a little more ground every year to the big box store they built in the next parish over. And she is inviting a soaking wet stranger to put a broken truck in her bay without asking for $1 up front. I need you to hold on to that, because what happens next, who this woman turns out to be, what she's carrying, and what she knows about this family, that's not something you see coming. And I didn't see it coming when I heard this story either." Cleo came out to the doorway. She looked at Zora Callum the way old women look at people they're assessing. Full length, once, quickly, and then she had made her decision. "You come in out of that rain," she said. Zora stood up slow. "Thank you, ma'am. I hate to impose. Cleo waved a hand. Manners and rain. Both of those tell me what I need to know. Come on. Zora followed Nadia around to the bay, where Nadia got under the hood while the rain picked up and drummed against the metal roof of the shop. Cleo put a kettle on. Outside, the sky turned nearly green, the way it does in South Louisiana when a storm means it. The diagnosis didn't take long. Your upper coolant hose split clean, Nadia said. She was standing on the running board with a work light, water dripping off the brim of her cap. Your overflow reservoir has a crack in it too, and your thermostat housing, she clicked the light to the corner of the engine bay, is leaking from the seal. You've been running hot for a while. Zora was leaning against the bay wall watching. Can you fix it? Give me an hour and a half. The parts. Nadia lowered herself off the running board. She walked to the parts wall, the whole back length of the shop, floor to ceiling, the thing Cleo called the library, and ran her finger along the shelf the way someone else would flip through book spines. She pulled a hose, checked a number, put it back, pulled another. The hose I got. She held it up. Reservoir. She checked the other side of the shelf. She came back out. She looked at the thermostat housing for a 2007 Silverado. She went to the computer on the counter, old and slow, and typed the part number in. It is a thermostat housing and an auto parts warehouse in Addis, 32 minutes each way, but they close at 5:30 and it is 5:03. She looked at Zora. What time is the ceremony? 6 o'clock. Nadia's jaw worked. She did the math out loud, slowly, and the math did not work. Not if she drove to Addis and back. Not if the rain kept up. Not if the road south of the river did what it did in storms. Then she stopped. She turned and went to the back of the shop, through the door that led to the storage room. Cleo's voice followed her. What are you looking for, baby? Nadia didn't answer. She was pulling boxes off the lower shelf, the ones she hadn't touched in a year or more. Her grandfather's parts. Vernon Fells had never thrown away a component he thought might be useful someday, and someday had been the most important word in his vocabulary. The whole bottom shelf of the storage room was his, organized in a system that made no sense to anyone except him, which meant it made no sense to anyone at all anymore. She found it in the fourth box. A thermostat housing, original equipment, still in its paper packaging, dusty from years of waiting. She turned it in her hands, checked the casting number. She carried it out and held it next to the engine. It was the right one. Cleo appeared in the doorway between the front counter and the bay. She looked at the housing in Nadia's hand. Then she looked at the ceiling for a moment, the way she did when something moved her that she didn't want to show. Your grandfather, she said quietly, and nothing else. Nadia went to work. 6:23 p.m. hose replaced, clamped, seated queen. 6:41 p.m. Reservoir patched with a 2-part epoxy. Vernon had kept on the third shelf for exactly the kind of problem that couldn't wait for parts. 7:02 p.m. The thermostat housing went on. Nadia torqued the bolts in sequence, 3 passes, the way Cleo had drilled into her years ago. Her hands were black with grease. Her back was bent under the hood, and her neck ached, and she did not stop. Zora sat on the shop stool, her cap in her hands. She had stopped checking her phone. Her son's ceremony had started 43 minutes ago. She knew. She was not pretending she didn't know. But she also was not leaving, because leaving wasn't going to make 6 o'clock unhappen. She watched Nadia work. After a while, she said, quietly, How long has this been your family's shop? Since 1988. My grandfather built it. Where is he now? Nadia wiped her chin on her sleeve. He died 6 years ago. Heart. Who keeps it running now? My grandmother and me. Zora looked at Cleo, who was standing in the doorway with 2 mugs of tea. Cleo handed one to Zora. Zora took it with both hands. How old is she? Zora asked, low, nodding toward Nadia. 19, Cleo said. She paused. She has her grandfather's hands. Zora turned the mug. Then she reached into the chest pocket of her jacket and pulled out a small, worn notebook, the kind with a cardboard cover and wire binding. She wrote something. Put it back. She didn't say what. 7:49 p.m. Nadia filled the reservoir with clean coolant. started the engine, let it reach temperature. The gauge climbed to normal and held. No steam. No drip. No warning light. She came around to the driver's side window. She's tight. You're going to want someone to look at the lower hose within the next few months, but tonight she'll hold. Zora Callum exhaled. Just once, long and slow. Then she sat there a moment with her eyes closed. She said, I missed it. Yes, ma'am. He was going to show me the ribbon. He had it all planned out, how he was going to walk up to me first and show me before he showed anybody else. The shop was quiet except for the engine idling and the rain against the metal roof. Nadia said, I'm sorry. Zora opened her eyes. She looked at Nadia. No, don't be sorry. You got me back on the road. Whatever he shows me tomorrow, I'll be there for it. She reached for her wallet. What do I owe you? Parts came to $14. Nadia said it without looking up. The labor, call it 30. 44 total. Zora counted out 2 20s and laid them on the workbench. Then she peeled out 3 more and set them beside. That's too much, Nadia said. Zora held up a hand. I watched you work for 2 hours. That's not too much. Nadia stood there. $60 was a tank of gas and most of a grocery run. She knew exactly what $60 was. But she slid 44 across the bench, picked it up, slid the rest back. 14 for parts, 30 for the work. I didn't find anything I charged for that your truck didn't need. Zora stared at her for a long moment. Then she said, I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to tell me the truth. Nadia met her eyes. Okay. Are you all right? This shop, your grandmother, are you all right? The question landed differently than Nadia expected. She looked at the floor. We're okay. Zora Callum let it sit there. Then she took a slow look around the shop. The parts wall, the old workbench, the bent light Cleo had duct-taped back together twice, the letter from the technical college, which Nadia did not know Zora had seen, sticking out one corner from under the counter register where Nadia had tucked it that morning. She reached into the chest pocket of her jacket again. She pulled out a business card. Plain, matte black. No logo. Just a name, a title, and a number in clean white print. Zora Callum, Senior Program Director, Veterans and Trades Foundation. She set it on the workbench. If anything changes, you call that number. You say your name, you say Cordell, and you wait. You hear me? Yes, ma'am. The engine was still running. Warm now, steady. Zora Callum put on her wet jacket, walked out through the bay door, and drove south toward Baton Rouge in the rain. The taillights disappeared around the bend on Route 9, and then the night closed up behind her like she had never been there. Nadia stood in the bay doorway watching the dark. Cleo put a hand on her shoulder. That was the right thing, baby. I know, Grandmère. She turned back inside and looked at the card on the workbench. Veterans and Trades Foundation. She had heard of it, vaguely. Some nonprofit that placed veterans into skilled trades programs, funded apprenticeships, that kind of thing. She didn't know exactly what they did, or what the senior program director of one would want with a 19-year-old girl in Cordell. She picked up the card, put it in her pocket, went to bed. She did not sleep well. For 3 days, Nadia Fells tried to put the card out of her mind. She worked the counter. She restocked the library. She drove to Plaquemine for the Saturday car wash shift and drove back. She counted the money in her savings jar twice. The number did not change. Sunday morning, she looked the organization up on the shop computer. Veterans in Trades Foundation, founded 2009. A non-profit arm of the federally chartered Montford Point Foundation, itself one of the oldest black veterans service organizations in the country. Annual endowment in 8 figures, programs in 41 states. The signature initiative was the Trade Path Grant, fully funded 2-year technical or trades program placements for veterans and their immediate family members who could demonstrate financial need. Nadia scrolled to the leadership page. Zora Callum, Senior Program Director, Gulf Coast Region. U.S. Marine Corps, retired, 8 years active. 2 tours. Decorated. discharged at the rank of staff sergeant after a training injury that ended her field service. Quote, attributed to Callum, the military gave me discipline and a bad knee. The trades gave me a future. I'm here to hand that to somebody else. Nadia sat back in the chair. She looked at the business card on the counter. She looked out the front window at Route 9, where Zora Callum's truck had disappeared 3 nights ago. She did not call that day. She was afraid to be wrong. More afraid to be right. Monday, Gerald Boudreau, the man who owned the new building supply center outside of town, pulled up to the shop in his truck and smiled his real estate smile and offered Cleo $60,000 cash for the property, which was 30% below what it was worth, and Cleo knew it. Cleo told him to have a nice day and closed the door. Nadia watched from the parts wall holding a wrench, saying nothing. That night she lay awake until 2 in the morning. She got up, found the card, turned it over in her hands. She thought about Vernon's thermostat housing in that dusty box. She thought about Zora's notebook, the way she'd written something down and not explained what. She thought about the Treed Path grant and the words, immediate family members. She put the card on the nightstand. She did not call. Not yet. What called her in the end was not courage. It was arithmetic. 39 days left. $912 short. The math didn't care how afraid she was. Thursday morning, she picked up the phone. She said her name. She said Cordell. She waited. 48 hours later, which takes us to that Saturday morning in late October, which is where this story breaks open like a window. Nadia Fells was in the back room of the shop helping Cleo restock the plumbing fixtures when she heard the sound. Low, rolling, not thunder. The sky was clear. It came from the south, up Route 9, and it was getting louder. Cleo came to the front window. Her hand went to her chest. But in a world. Nadia stepped outside. The Veterans and Trades Foundation convoy that pulled into the gravel lot of Fells Hardware that Saturday was not large. It was not 200 motorcycles. It was 7 vehicles, 4 pickup trucks, 2 vans, and 1 gleaming black SUV carrying the Gulf Coast regional team of the foundation, along with 3 members of the Montford Point Foundation's board of directors, who had driven down from New Orleans at 6 in the morning. Zora Callum got out of the lead truck. She was in clean civilian clothes. Her knee brace showed below her right pant leg. She was carrying a leather portfolio under one arm and a small wrapped package in the other hand. She walked up the steps and looked at Cleo. Mrs. Fells, my name is Zora Callum. I am sorry to come unannounced. I have been trying to reach you through your granddaughter, but I understand she was not ready to say anything until she was sure. Cleo looked at Nadia. Nadia stood on the bottom step. She looked at the ground. I didn't want to get your hopes up, Grandmère. Cleo was quiet for a long moment. Then she exhaled through her nose, once, the way she did when she had decided something. Come in, Ms. Callum. They sat at the work table in the back of the shop, the one Vernon had built himself from reclaimed pine, the surface stained with 40 years of use. Zora set the portfolio down. She folded her hands. Mrs. Fells, I need to tell you something before I show you what's in here. There is something I owe this family that has nothing to do with that Thursday night. Cleo put both hands flat on the table. Zora looked at Nadia, then back at Cleo. 8 years ago, I was driving home from Fort Polk on a state highway outside of DeRidder. My truck at the time was a 2004 Ram, and it threw a belt so fast I barely got it to the shoulder. I was in uniform. I was alone. I had a 10-month-old in the back seat, and the phone signal was gone, and it was 104 degrees. Cleo's head tilted. 4 cars passed me without stopping. Then a green pickup slowed down. An older man got out. Coveralls, hands like he'd been working since he was 12. He popped the hood, diagnosed it in under 2 minutes, drove 6 miles to town, came back with a replacement belt, refused payment, and said, Zora paused. She took a breath. He said, Baby, when somebody needs help on the road, you don't charge them for the work. You just do the work. The shop was completely quiet. Nadia's hands had gone still on the table. I got his name before I drove away. I wrote it down in my notebook the way I always did when something mattered to me. Vernon Fells, Cordell Hardware, Route 9. Cleo made a sound that had no words in it. I looked for him the following year. I found the shop. But by that time, Zora stopped. I heard he had passed. Heart, someone told me. I didn't know who else to contact. I told myself I would find a way to come back and settle it. And then the years got loud, the way they do. She looked at Cleo directly. And then last Thursday, his granddaughter fixed my truck, in the same shop, with the same hands, with the same words. Nadia's eyes had filled. She did not know, until that moment, that her grandfather had kept a green notebook on the shelf above his workbench. She had dusted it every Sunday for 6 years without ever opening it. She had assumed it was a parts log. It was not a parts log. It was a record of every person Vernon Fells had helped on the side of the road over 43 years of driving and fixing and never asking for anything in return. Dates, names, situations, outcomes when he happened to find out. 217 entries. The last one, dated 18 months before his death, was a young soldier named Z. Callum, Fort Polk, Ram 2004. Belt. Baby in the back. She cried when she could finally use the phone. Cleo put her face in her hands. Nadia reached across the table and held her grandmother's wrists. Zora let the silence breathe. Then she opened the portfolio. She set the first document on the table, slid it to Cleo. Mrs. Fells, the Montford Point Foundation, has settled the outstanding balance on this property, the mortgage arrears and the back taxes. The deed is being transferred to clear title. It goes into your name, free. Cleo's hands were shaking. Zora laid a second document beside it. The Trade Path Grant. Full placement for Nadia in the Louisiana Community Technical College Electrical Trades Program. 2-year funding, tuition, books, tools, and a monthly living stipend. She will not need to work the car wash. Nadia made a sound she immediately covered with her hand. There is also, Zora placed a third sheet on the table, a registered apprenticeship agreement with Sterling Electric, the Foundation's partner contractor in Baton Rouge. Every summer during the program, Nadia apprentices full-time with their master electricians. Paid. Real work. Real hours. Real credentials when she comes out. Nadia could not speak. She stared at her own name on the page. She had written that name on the technical college application 4 times, scratching it out and starting over because her handwriting went shaky with want every time she tried. Zora set a fourth document down. This is the operational proposal for the Vernon Fells Community Repair Hub. The foundation will fund a full renovation of Fells hardware, expanded service bay, updated electrical, climate-controlled storage for antique parts. We're also endowing a small annual grant, in Vernon's name, for family-owned repair shops in Iberville Parish that are at risk of closure. 3 shops in the first year. The idea is to stop what almost happened to this one from happening to the others. Cleo looked up. She opened her mouth and closed it. One more thing. Zora lifted the wrapped package she had carried in. She set it on the table in front of Nadia. It's for you. Nadia unwrapped it slowly. Inside was Vernon's green notebook. Not the original, which Zora had photographed every page of and returned to the shelf, but a bound reproduction, printed clean on good paper, with a short foreword from Zora's own hand on the first page. The foreword said, "This is what 217 acts of roadside kindness look like when you write them all down. It looks like a hardware store. It looks like a girl with grease on her hands. It looks like the reason I came back." Cleo pressed both hands to her face and did not move for a long time. Zora stood. She looked at Nadia. "Your grandfather found me when I had a baby in a hot truck and no signal, and the whole road was passing me by. He fixed my belt and he wouldn't take $1. He said, 'Do the work and keep moving.'" She picked up her portfolio. "You do the same thing, you hear me? Whatever they put in front of you at Sterling Electric, you do it right, and you do it all the way. You don't let them skip over you. You make them look twice." Nadia stood. She was crying openly now, not loudly, just the way water moves when it finally gets where it's going. She nodded once. Zora reached into the portfolio one last time. She pulled out a small pin, brass, shaped like a wrench, and pinned it to Nadia's shirt collar. In the Veterans and Trades Foundation, she said, "We give these to the civilian partners who hold our people together while we're gone. Your grandfather held a lot of people together. This one's been waiting for his family." She walked to the door. Then she turned back. Mrs. Fells. The man in entry 214, the one whose radiator split outside of Maringouin in 2009. That was my uncle. He called me from the road after Vernon fixed it and said he'd been helped by the kindest man in Louisiana. I was at Fort Bragg. I wrote the name down. I stood up. Same shop. Cleo looked up through her hands. "I've owed this family twice," Zora said. "We all have." She walked out. Through the front window, Nadia and Cleo watched the 7 vehicles pull out of the gravel lot and head south on Route 9. The October sun was bright. The lot was still and quiet. The F in the Fells sign above the door threw a shadow onto the gravel in the shape of a bird in flight. Cleo spoke first. She said it quietly, to no one in particular. "Vernon, baby, you did something." Nadia looked at the green notebook in her hands. She opened to a random page. Her grandfather's handwriting was careful and even, the handwriting of a man who wanted to be understood. The entry read, "Tuesday. Woman with a flat on Highway 1. Spare was flat too. Drove her to town and back. She offered money 3 times. Told her to pass it on. She cried a little. Wrote down my name. I hope she does something good with it." Nadia closed the book. She looked at the workbench under the window, the one with the stained surface and the ring marks from 40 years of coffee mugs. She set the notebook beside the old vise. Then she went out to the bay, put on her grandfather's coveralls, still hanging on the hook where he had left them, still smelling faintly of the motor oil he favored, and she started working on the truck that had been waiting since Friday. She did not cry anymore. She just worked. 6 months later, the sign above the door was fixed. All 3 letters, full and bright. A local ironworker, a man named Dale, had done it in trade for an electrical consultation Nadia had given him free of charge. The new sign also had a small brass plate mounted below the Fells name. It read, "Est, 1988, Vernon's Shop, still open." The first Vernon Fells community grant went to Tidewater Lawnmower Repair, 2 towns over, which had been $900 away from closing. They stayed open. The owner hired a kid from the Votech. Nadia's first semester GPA was 3.88. Her master electrician at Sterling Electricane, a woman with 30 years in the trade, told her at the end of the summer that she ran conduit cleaner than half the journeymen on the payroll. She said it flatly, as a fact, the way people who know their work speak. Nadia called Zora. "I wanted to tell you." Zora said, "Good. Now go back to work." On a Friday afternoon in November, almost exactly a year after that Thursday in the rain, Nadia was closing up the shop alone. Cleo had a doctor's appointment in town. The bay was quiet. The lot was empty. She was locking the back door when she heard footsteps on the gravel. She turned. Standing at the edge of the lot was a young man, maybe 20, dressed in a restaurant uniform, black pants, black shirt, a name tag that caught the last of the light. He was holding a bicycle wheel in both hands, the tire flat and the rim bent from what looked like a hard fall. His face was tired in the particular way of someone who has been going since before sunrise. He said, "The gas station said there might be somebody here who could help. I just need to get this straight enough to ride home. I can't pay much." Nadia looked at the wheel. Then at him. Then at the darkening sky over the parking lot. She opened the bay door. "Come on in. My grandmother's got the radio on inside. I'll put the kettle on." He stepped in out of the October dark, and she got to work. That is how it goes. That is how it has always gone. A man who spent 43 years stopping for strangers on Louisiana highways left behind a notebook that became a foundation that funded a girl who paid it forward on a November evening to a tired boy with a bent wheel. Not because anyone told her to, because it was what her grandfather did. Because some things you keep doing, even when you don't know why. If this story moved you, share it. Somebody out there needs to hear it today, and I want to know, When was the last time a stranger stopped for you? Or you stopped for them? Tell me in the comments. I read everyone. I keep thinking about Vernon's green notebook. Not the fancy-bound reproduction Zora had printed on good paper. The original. The one that sat on a shelf above a workbench in Cordell, Louisiana for 6 years, while his granddaughter dusted it every Sunday without ever opening it. 217 entries. 43 years of stopping on the side of the road for strangers who had nowhere else to turn. He never told anyone. He just wrote it down. That's the part that gets me every time I come back to this story. Vernon Fells didn't stop for people because he expected anything back. He stopped because he believed that was simply what you did when someone needed help, and you had the ability to give it. That kind of character. The kind that holds even when nobody's watching, even when there's no audience, even when the person you're helping is a soldier you'll never see again in 100-degree heat on a Louisiana back road. That's not something you perform. It's something you build, quietly, over a lifetime of small decisions that nobody records except you. And then one day, somebody finds the notebook. What I find myself sitting with is how much Nadia carried without letting it show. 19 years old, $1,100 short, 43 days from losing the one shot she'd worked toward since she was old enough to strip a wire. She did the math every morning and the math said no, and she went back to the counter anyway. She picked up the extra shift anyway. She kept the lights on and the bay open, and she didn't burden her grandmother with numbers that weren't moving. That's not just grit. That's a kind of quiet intelligence about what you can control and what you have to outlast. She couldn't make the money appear, but she could keep showing up until something changed. And she knew the difference. And when Zora Callum pulled into that gravel lot with a split coolant hose and a mist ceremony already behind her, Nadia didn't ask what it was worth before she pulled the truck into the bay. She looked at the sky, she looked at the woman, and she got to work, the same way her grandfather would have. Not because she knew who Zora was, not because she was calculating anything, because the work was in front of her and she had the hands to do it. That's the thing about doing right when it costs you something real. It leaves a mark on the world that you can't see yet. Vernon couldn't see it. He just kept writing in his notebook. Nadia couldn't see it either, that Thursday night when she slid $44 across the workbench and pushed the rest back. But the mark was already there. Zora found it. The Montford Point Foundation found it. A deed got cleared. A scholarship got funded. A shop that was $900 from closing stayed open. And the man who ran it got a grant named after him. And 3 other shops in Iberville Parish got a fighting chance because of a girl who learned from a man who stopped for strangers on the highway for 4 decades and never once asked to be remembered for it. I shared this story because I needed it. Not as a lesson, just as proof. Proof that the things you do right, the quiet ones, the ones with no audience, the ones where you push the money back across the bench when you could really use it, those things don't disappear. They go somewhere. They find their way back. Sometimes it takes 12 years. Sometimes it takes a thunderstorm and a split coolant hose and a 19-year-old with her grandfather's hands. But it comes back.